Well, Andrew, welcome to Tartu, and Jeet, please.
Ma tegelikult, see on minu jorutoru, ma tegelikult üldse üldiselt ei tegele esinemisega, aga Viktorile on väga keeruline ära öelda.
Teame.
Ja kuna Viktor ja Andrew on väga inspireerivad inimesed, siis ma nõustusin jorutama natuke.
Hello, tere. Здравствуйте. Today we are here to welcome and send off on his way Andrew Mathews. But first I'll elaborate for a few minutes on the concept of Tartu-Vabaduse, Saar. Please forgive me for my poor Estonian. Mina tahan õppida eesti keelt, see on väga raske. I am proposing to you a strange concept that Tartu is a Vabaduse Saar. I came to Tartu in 1977 and immediately fell in love. And I felt that this was my city, and wherever my travels took me, from Alaska to Florence, from London to California, Tartu was always in my heart. It's always in my heart. It might be an imagined concept, it might be an imagined love, but Tartu paid me with a very real dividends and returned its love tenfold, and for which I am very thankful. Aita, Tartu. The miracles which come with love, with true love, started happening to me right away upon my arrival. For example, I came here in '77 to start to apply to Ylikooli, and instead of that, I was put in prison. At that point, I wasn't smart enough to understand what was happening, and sometimes it takes years, if not decades, to really gather all the information and make your evaluations. But first thing, 6 years of torture, of going to physics classes, 6 years of not understanding anything, just evaporated. I became a physicist. I went to MIT as a physicist, and for that I'm thankful to Tartu. Second thing, when I came here, I love the elongated cups, the different headgear of Yuli College students. I love the spirit of an old university, that place which unites everybody from the time of emergence of the great university culture in the world, from Bologna and Padua to Cambridge and Oxford to Sorbonne in Paris, where the teaching was done in Latin, and it was done in Latin originally in Academia Tartu. So when I was put in prison, only later, looking at the Linima Museum at the exposition, I realized that the building I was in was actually an original building of Academia Tartu Gustaviana. So in a way, my desire was fulfilled. I wanted to be part of that university, of that tradition. And Tartu did direct me in the right place. The third miracle that happened to me, and for which I'm immensely thankful to Kapitan Malinkin and all that put me in prison at that moment, because when I first came to Estonia in '77 in July, I immediately sensed that this country was free. I couldn't really put it in words. What made this country free? It was part of the Soviet Empire. It was pampered by the Soviet money. They wanted to make a showcase of the Baltic states. Therefore, this was somewhat privileged place. Yet, I did sense that Vabaduse was there. Little did I know that at that moment, in the southern Estonia, was living one man, Xavier, who was carrying the burden of freedom on his shoulder for all over the Estonia. Later, September 30, 1978, he would come and liberate Estonia, because nothing is free in this world, and you have to pay dearly for freedom. Freedom is only good when there is blood underneath it, as Parajanov showed in the legend of Suran's castle. When building a castle, people would put their best, sacrifice their best, so the foundation would be solid. The Eagles of Kafkas, Shamil, who for many years waged the war against Russians, gave in, and there was no more freedom in Kafkas. Vercingetorix, the leader of Celts, at one point gave in to Julius Caesar troops, and there was no more freedom for Celts in Gaul. They were a Roman province. Xavier, when came his time, paid the dues for all of Estonia, of my imagination maybe. But that's why I believe Estonia did pay its freedom, because when it was time to stand up his ground, 69 years old man, against trained KGB soldiers who came to arrest him, stood his ground and died. He was never chained, never brought in prison. Unfortunately, in 1478, as the troops of Ivan III stormed last Russian Republic, Novgorod, Marfa Posadnitsa gave in and spent her last 15 years of her life in prison, in the city where I was from, Nizhny Novgorod in Volga. Xavier didn't do that. He died fighting. Then I was, after release from prison, I traveled to North Russia, Arkhangelsk, Yaroslavl, and then I came back to Tartu because that's where I felt I belonged. I didn't have any passport, propiska, and registration, so I lived in a little village of Kartna, not that far from here, where an old Estonian guy didn't ask me for any papers. He let me shelter there and do my travels and my attempts to set Russia free. This moment, paying respect to the Tartu of free Russians who came here, and to Andrei Kurbsky, who from Tartu, the most famous and first Russian dissidents, later documented in his letter exchange with Ivan the Terrible, Kurbsky, Ivan the Terrible letter exchange, also came to Tartu, smelled the freedom air, and from here he defected and became traitor to the Mongol yoke that Moscow is imposing and still imposes on the rest of Russia. And for that, I'm also thankful. And now, just to give you a little bit of a taste of what Tartu is to me, I've been writing poems to the beloved, because that's what you do to the beloved. You feel, you write a poem, I'll recite you just a couple poems. And и вот я в Тарту, солнечное утро, булыжники на старой мостовой, старый универ, и вдруг как будто другая жизнь, и даже век другой. Мост ангела, мост дьявола, студенты со шпагами в шляпах на бекрень, рекою пива, все амбивалентно, все непонятно, тень, все на плетень. Я вижу Тарту, русский, польский, шведский, литовский воин, мушкетон дрожит. Я вижу, словно воспитатель в детской латынью речь ведет иезуит. И брат эстонский, выходя из леса, спокоен и задумчив намека, взмывает синя муста Волги, словно месса, и плещет Ямайоги, мать река. Трансцендентально все и персонально. Вон дуэлянты на мосту сошлись, и старые вечные студенты примеряют кто шпагу, кто перо, а кто-то ввысь взлетает, чтобы вдребезги разбиться на берегу реки и навсегда остаться в городе, где заново родиться не стоит ни малейшего труда. Теперь я прочитаю еще одно стихотворение про Тарту, уже по-английски. Называется Hopping the Atlantic from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Tartu. Tartu, a city, a password, a myth. Tarbatu, Yuri, Tartu, Darpat. Russians, Lithuanians, Germans, and Swedes all have a claim in your heart. A member of Hansa, a city that's free, when church and the kings were ruling the world. Rebellion always is brewing within thee, and over your fate kings were drawing swords. Reformation, counter-reformation, Jesuits, rebellions, starvations, burned to the ground, yet always came back. Latin, rhetoric, theology, luck, clerici, vagantes, professors and students, swords at the ready, and beer by barrels. Ether is fuming, poems are written, rebels are running to you as before, mysteries play their marvels in here. Empires are fallen, the prisons thrown open, love's in the air. O Tartu, my dear, the city a dream, to you now I'm hopping. And then we met in Maidan. Maidan was that rebellion. Maidan was when kids with aluminum shields went against the bullets, where fires were burning, the fires of sacrifice, and where blood was spilling, the blood that freedom so thirstily requires. On the barricades, burn rubber fills my lungs, my eyes are full of tears. I crawl onto the top as bullets whistle by. I have not been alive, life never was so dear. When next to me a brother, the one I never knew, extends his hand to me and says, we were waiting for you to answer calls, our desperate calls for help. The fire lights the sky. What happens moments later will be revealed in turn, in burning tires smell. And with that, I told Andrew, come and check out this little city on a small river where mysteries of the world play their play. And to welcome him, I asked my dear friend, Merka, to give him a proper Tartu welcome. Please.
Viktor palus mul laulda laulu. Aga ma ei laula mitte Tartu laulu, vaid hoopistükkis, kuna Andrew on mees, kes hääletab läbi revolutsioonide, siis ma laulaks hoopis ühe laulu, mis meie põlvkonnal seostub revolutsiooniga, aga iseenesest on laul ju kena, kuigi tal on otsesed seosed suure sotsialistliku oktoobriga. Aga ega nende sõnade mõte sellest ei muutu, et mingisugune režiim on selle loo ära lörtsinud. Julgesti vennad nüüd tööle, võitlema hüütakse meid, endale priiuse mahale, rinnaga murrame teid. Endale priiuse mahale, rinnaga murrame teid. Tõusime rahvast, kus häda, võimetu valguse püüd. Vabadus vennalik side, olgu me võitluse hüüd. Vabadus vennalik side, olgu me võitluse hüüd. Väärame võimuga käega, ikke mis lasub me päev. Kostab siis võitmatu väega, vabanenud rahvaste hääl. Kostab siis võitmatu väega, vabanenud rahvaste hääl. Julgesti vennad nüüd tööle, võitlema hüütakse meid. Endale priiuse maale, rinnaga murrame teed. Endale priiuse maale, rinnaga murrame teed.
Now we cede the floor to Andrew Mathews. He can
All right, thank you to everybody for coming tonight. Thank you for putting this together, for hosting me. Thank you to America for the beautiful welcome. To Victor for everything, for the cabin, for Xavier, for Tartu, for all of the hospitality, for all of the PR, all of the running all over town, handing out flyers, shaking hands, hassling people, beating down doors for me. I really appreciate it. Thank you to T, who helped find this place. Thank you for having us here. Thank you to Hannes for making me feel so welcome, and Xavier. Many good times, good food, good laughs. Thank you to this lovely young woman here. I don't remember her name, but Victor was able to guilt her into coming today. She didn't have the flyers ready on time. Nonetheless, Sandra, thank you for coming to take photos tonight. And the few of you who maybe came because you were actually interested in hearing what we had to say tonight. And, of course, we cannot forget Carl, the man of mystery behind the camera, who makes it all happen. Put the slides together for us, invites us to his offices, and helps it all come together. So, anyway, here I am. The paper did an article on me. I'm not really sure what it says. I see a few things in English that I recognize, and I know roughly what I told him, but I don't know how it translated. So, at the risk of being redundant, I'll repeat myself here tonight. Usually most people ask me why I do this, how I got into doing what I do, and backpacking and hitchhiking and traveling to places where maybe it's not always revolution, but it's politics and action unfolding in different ways and different shades and colors. But mostly, I think it stems from curiosity. I'm not really sure what to believe, except for the fact that I believe in experiential knowledge. When I was 4 years old, I remember my grandmother babysitting me one evening. I think my parents were out on a date or at a wedding, and my siblings were out playing with their friends or spending the night at neighbors' houses. So it was just me and my grandmother, and she was doing some ironing. She was ironing my dad's work shirts, of all things for her to be doing like laundry while she's babysitting. It's beyond ridiculous, if you ask me. Anyway, the telephone rang the days before the wireless telephone. And she walks in the other room, and before she walks in the other room, she turns to me, and I'm playing on the carpet with some trucks. And I had no interest in what she was doing, ironing these clothes and folding them and setting them aside, until this phone rang, and she looked at me and she put the iron there and she said, "Don't touch this. This is very, very hot. You will burn yourself." And I said, okay. I never would have touched that iron had she not told me. I had no interest in this. And so she goes in the other room to take the telephone call, and I put down my truck and I walk over immediately to the iron and I put my hand on it and I burned myself pretty badly. Nothing time can't fix. But anyway, I learned my lesson, and she was right. It was very hot. She was trying to save me the trouble, but I had to learn for myself how hot was that iron. And so that's what drives me, curiosity, intellectual curiosity. I don't want to believe what I am told at face value. I want to question it and experience it for myself. Which then normally leads me on to a few years later. I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and my parents believed in trying to culture me into taking piano lessons and music and everything. So after school, one day a week, my mom would take us to some old woman's house down the street, and I'd go with one of my older brothers, and he would have a lesson for a half hour and I would have to wait. And this old woman had a stack of National Geographics, about 4 feet tall, just stacked in the corner of her room. And I would sit there while my brother took his lesson and just flip through all of these old National Geographic magazines. And I would see the people in Africa with those neck rings, stretching out their necks, or people in India burning bodies on the Ghats in Varanasi, or the Great Wall of China, or any number of cultures I couldn't begin to imagine ever seeing in my lifetime, ever. I mean, the furthest I had made it was 2 miles out of my backyard, probably at that age. So to make it to Estonia, or to make it to Kyrgyzstan, or to make it to Pakistan, or to Ukraine, or any of these places I've traveled, I never could have imagined, except for flipping through the pages of these old women's National Geographics as a kid. And I ended up quitting piano not too long after. I just didn't care for it compared to sports. But anyway, that's between the iron burning me and the magazines that I read as a kid. That's what corrupted me. And that's what brings me here today. A little bit of me wants to see what's in Estonia. Why in the hell is Barack Obama coming to Estonia, right? The first time an American president has ever come to Estonia.
Not really, actually. Not the least of government.
So anyway, I'm not really sure how to structure this or what to share with you. I know Victor has some structure laid out where he wanted me to maybe share a few stories and then do question and answer. We can go about that. I can kind of tell you in chronological order some places I've been, some good things, some bad things, or I generally feel more comfortable just taking questions over beers, which will probably be the most fruitful, and that'll happen after this is all said and done. At Jen Klubi, everybody is welcome to come. So, with that aside, most people want to know what the best thing is that I've ever experienced in travel. And the best thing that I've ever witnessed was in Nepal. And I would say to anybody who's looking to begin traveling anywhere outside of a culture that they grew up in, to start in Nepal. The people are extremely hospitable, extremely welcoming. They can get you high in so many ways you can't begin to imagine. But for me, the thing that got me highest was the hospitality. And I was trekking in Annapurna with a German girl who was on gap year from studying, and we had finished hiking or trekking, whatever you prefer, for about 6 hours. We set out at 6, we stopped for lunch at noon, we have lunch for about an hour, and we go to pay the bill, and she realizes that she has forgotten her wallet, she has forgotten her passport, she left them behind at the guest house, which is 6 hours behind where we started. But I said, okay, like, this isn't a problem, don't worry, we'll go back, we'll get your things, and we'll start out again, we'll do it again tomorrow, it's not the end of the world. And she's very frustrated and upset, and so I pay the bill, and I say, alright, and we grab our bags, put them on, and we just start walking, and we don't even get 20 steps outside of this village, and a 10-year-old boy comes running full speed into town, like dust kicking up behind him, and he has a passport photo that she had in her wallet, and he holds it up, and he's shaking it and looking at it, and he's like, this is you, yeah? And he puts it up to her face, and she grabs it, and she looks, and she's like, yeah, this is me. And he's like, here's your wallet, here's your passport. And we were just dumbfounded, and we were like, how did you get this here? Like, how? Like, we hiked 6 hours, and we just were going back. There's no way you ran for 6 hours. And we tried to offer him some small money for his efforts, and he keeps saying no. He's refused all money, and he says, I cannot. He said, I only live in the next village down. There was more than one person. We all ran one village, and there were like 7 kids who ran as fast as they could with her passport and her wallet from one village to the next and handed it off, all the way to bring it to us having lunch. And I said, these people are amazing. This is the best. It doesn't get any better than this. And so with that, I say, go to Nepal, see what Namaste is all about. It's the Nepali version of Aloha in Hawaii, just showing people what your culture is about, what the Estonians, what you guys are showing me here today. And with that said, you can move on to the worst story. There's always the immediate follow-up, and the worst, I would say, is Cairo. And this happened last year, January 25th, the anniversary of the Arab Spring, and I'm friends with a few photographers from other countries in Europe and Southeast Asia, and anyway, we had met up and been observing things happening around town. They were having elections since the government upheaval and everything, and we ended up being in the wrong place at the wrong time, which all of us have a propensity for, because it's the only way to really see anything that's happening. But anyway, we stopped moving, and that's one of the things we kind of swear by, is that, like a shark, you must keep swimming to stay alive in a crowd of people in political upheaval. You're always best to stay moving, because nobody has time to stop and question you, and if they do, you can just brush them off and ignore them. You don't understand and keep walking. But we stopped. My friends stopped to have a cigarette. I stopped because we had walked for miles and miles, and I just needed to to stand and lean against a light post. And with that said, my friends lit up their cigarettes, and somebody came over and they asked, where are you from, what are you doing? And we tell them, we're from here, we're from there, and we're just hanging out, we're not doing anything. But with that said, the gentleman turned around and said, okay, and disappeared. And I didn't really pay much attention to where he went, but my one friend says he saw him walk over to a police officer, and the police officer then went to the van, the special forces or SWAT team, whatever it is. And about every half hour or so, I think their directions that day were to fill up the van with people who were creating problems for the government and bring them into the police station for questioning and welcoming, if you will. So at that point, some man gets out of the big Batman-looking police vehicle. He points to us, and the biggest men they have around just start walking over very slowly, but very distinctly towards us. Nobody else in the crowd, everybody in the crowd knew that they were coming for us, it seemed like. We didn't know what we were in for, but we couldn't run. We couldn't cause more of a scene. We didn't stand a chance, I don't think. If we did run, the crowd would have taken off after us and beaten us right there in the square. And so anything they come over, anyway, they ask us for our passports, we present our passports, they take them, think, well, I'm never getting my passport back, I'm trapped in Egypt. And my friends are thinking the same thing. And so anyway, then the police grab us and start taking us towards the truck. We don't know what's happening. We think maybe they're trying to protect us, maybe they want to put us in the truck and get us out of here before we're beaten by the crowd. And we have seen this happen earlier in the day to men with long Muslim beards. Maybe they were Muslim Brotherhood supporters, maybe they weren't, but anyway, if one or two people would get in their face, then all of a sudden 20 or 30 people would get in their face, and they would just be gone. So we went with the police towards this wagon, and as they're taking us through the streets, children come running out from the crowd, throwing bottles at us. Grown men are spitting on us and cursing at us. Everybody is taking their turn, getting their licks in on the foreigners who were there to observe what was happening in the streets. And so they parade us through the crowd, and the whole scene starts to get excited. Everybody starts cheering and screaming. This is in Ramsey Square. If you know Ramsey Square, there's an overpass that goes around the outside. And it was almost like the upper deck in a stadium at a football match or something. And I can see the men up there still just waving in their arms and throwing things down at me, just making it rain. And I'll never forget that, but I just remember this giant man with his arm around my neck just dragging me through the street as this little kid comes up and looks at me and just slaps me in the face and takes off running. And this was okay. The police didn't put him away, they didn't do anything. I was like, what is happening? Are they really going to protect me, or am I going away for a long time, never to be seen again? And so we get to the van, and the van has like 4 windows in it that are about this big, and just enough to look out, and then it has chain link fencing all the way around outside of the steel cage, the steel locker. And they open the back doors, and the crowds are swarming in on us, and the man that is opening the door to let me get thrown in the back of the truck looks at me, and he smiles from ear to ear, and he says, "Welcome, get in." And I thought, for those 2 seconds, I thought, I'm going to be okay. Like, they're just going to take care of me. Like, this is okay. And the second I dipped my head and the man pushed me through the door into that wagon, it is pitch black from the daylight. I couldn't see anything in there. And I went head first in, and I get the butt of an AK-47 right into my forehead, and it knocks me onto the ground in the back of the truck. And 10, maybe 12 guys jump on top of me and start trying to hit me in the face and put their hands in my pockets to steal my money and my camera and whatever else I had. It was all going to be gone. But the good thing about all of that is, if there's 12 of them trying to hit you, they can't really get a good shot in on you. And I'm not a very big person to begin with, so there isn't a whole lot of real estate. So my friends tell me that it was maybe 2 minutes. I find it hard to believe that it would be more than 1 minute that I was in there by myself with them beating me and robbing me. But then one by one, my friend from Denmark, my friend from Australia, my friend from Scotland, they just start funneling them in one by one, and they get the same welcoming that I got. And then they keep cramming Egyptians into the van after us. We had 100 people in a van that's made to carry maybe 12. And
Hey, but the Scottish guy kept fighting back.
the Scottish guy fought him every inch of the way, the whole way, all the way to the police station. And even when we got in the police station, it was another beating when they get you out of the truck on the way in. It's like you run the gauntlet, and then they take you into the room. All of the kids, the Egyptians that they arrested, are young kids. They're students. They study photography. They study journalism. They study IT. They're all studying philosophy, or they're not big muscular guys. They're intellectuals. They're nerds. They're skinny little nobodies, and the only threat to the police and the military is between their ears. And these kids are wearing American flag t-shirts, or they're wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt, or whatever, but they were not big military guys. They were just kids who thought for themselves. And they couldn't fight back, and they got beat far worse than any of us foreigners got beat. And they took us into the police station. They take us up the stairs to the holding room, and they beat us up in the hallway, and get us to the room, and I had my big beard, which you'll see in some of these photos here. This is from Cairo. This was from a flash mob that I took off in the middle of this, but we'll get back to that. But anyway, in the police station, they grabbed me up by my beard, and they thought, because of my beard, that I was a Muslim Brotherhood supporter. And a man gets in my face and says something, Mohammed Morsi, something Americi, and slaps me, and then they drop me to the ground. And I say, all right, like, that's fine. But on the ground in front of me are maybe already 100 of these Egyptian kids sitting with their hands behind their back, just kneeling and with their heads down.
You show how they were sitting, what position?
Just like that. Some of them, you hear them crying. Maybe some of them had to go to the bathroom and piss themselves. There's no sympathy in there. And they had to go through the same questioning that we had to go through. And we would see some of them leave our room and go into the room with the Egyptian interrogators. And we would hear the screaming, and we would hear the crying, and we would hear the things cracking and see them come back with blood on their t-shirts. And just not know what was going to happen to us while they were holding us. But as he said, his favorite part of the story is the Scottish guy, my Scottish friend. He was the only one of us who fought back against these police officers when we came into the room and they were beating him, and he just had his hands tied behind his back, and the guy said something right in his face, and he just cracked him one time.
Glasgow kiss, mate.
Yeah, after in the evening, he tells me that's just a Glasgow kiss. I was just saying hello. This is protocol for a Scot. Apparently, he did the same thing to the owner of a bar that we went to in Ukraine, in Maidan. And the owner of the bar actually took kindly to it and offered to buy us a round of drinks. He said in all of his years of running a pub, no foreigner ever had the nerve to headbutt him.
That's the owner of the bar who had like
this is the same owner of the bar who I go to pay my bill one evening, and I think he is just cleaning his glass or cleaning somebody else's glass under the counter, only to realize when he tells me that my drinks are free that he is putting bullets into his gun as he spins it and closes it and puts it in his pants, and explains to me that he is going to go take his turn guarding the hospital that night with a few of his friends. But anyway, we spent the evening in Cairo in the police station. We get out at about midnight. We sign papers we don't understand. It's all in Arabic. We don't know. We're signing our rights away if they're going to release us. Who knows? But they do decide to release us if we sign these papers. So we sign them, and we think, oh man, like maybe there's people waiting to beat us outside the police station, because we saw some Egyptians get released previously and get beaten as we were coming in. They were exchanging. It was just a steady cycle of people all day in there being processed. But this man who translated for us said his family has a guest house. He'd like to take us to the guest house and offer us tea for our troubles. And I was thinking, how is tea gonna fix any of the problems we had today? But whatever. And I tell my friends I have second thoughts about this. You know, we don't know who this guy is. We just signed this paper. We don't know what we signed. All we know is they could be taking us to another prison that is unmarked, and we signed out saying that we've been released from them, only to disappear amongst their mounds of paperwork that weren't burned during the Arab Spring, because nothing was digitized. They don't have any computers in their police stations or their account records or any of this stuff. So they take us to the man's guest house, and his elevator, I still can see the stainless steel. It was like the heaviest reinforced looking elevator I had seen in any building in Egypt. And I was just thinking, this isn't right, this isn't good, man. They're gonna take us to whatever floor we're going to, and we're gonna get out, and there's going to be 20 men that jump on us and beat us and detain us. And I told my friends, and they said, oh, I didn't really think about it like that. I was like, we just spent 8 hours in jail. We've been beaten countless times, and you've already forgotten that maybe we're going into more trouble right now. You just forgive and forget this fast. It's mind-blowing to me. But anyway, we get up there, and the elevator doors open, and it's just two old women, the man's mother and his aunt, and he explains to them what happened to us, and they laugh at us, and they say, you guys are a bunch of idiots, but here, have some tea. So it ended up all right, I guess. It could have been much worse. That's definitely the worst I've had in my travels.
Tell about American flag.
Yeah, back to the first photo with the fire. That goes back to before the 25th. maybe a week before the 25th, I was walking out in the evening to go get dinner with my Australian friend who took the photograph, and there was a flash mob. The social media is really, really effective in all of these political campaigns that people are putting together, and they put together a flash riot through Twitter in a matter of 25 to 30 minutes, and the street swelled in about 15 minutes from maybe 1,000 merchants in the alleyway to about 15,000 25-year-old Egyptians coming out with signs and flags and sticks, just pumping their fist in the air, screaming and singing, and all of a sudden they took off marching just in circles around the block 3 times. And they didn't break any of the windows in any of the shops. They didn't steal anything. It was amazing how peaceful it was, even though men are shooting off fireworks, and there's just so many people. I remember going by a parked car that got caught in the flash mob and just seeing an old Egyptian woman just sitting in her seat, staring at her window as 15,000 angry youths come walking by, just rubbing up against her car, but not scratching it with the rivets on their jeans, nothing. Not poking the windows, not writing on the car, any of that. They respected everything. And then, in 1 second, some kid decided to be a delinquent, and he picked up 1 stone from the sidewalk and just and broke it into 10, 15 pieces. And after that, everybody went crazy. The mob mentality just took off with 1 kid picking up a stone amongst 15,000 that had been peaceful. Once it was like he gave the official okay for the rest of the mob to start breaking things, with just breaking 1 piece of public property on the street. And so with that, they started pushing over trash cans and setting garbage on fire, and typical juvenile street protest vandalism behavior. And then they go to a poet, of all people, around Cairo, a few of the squares. Some of the most respected people in the community are the poets, and they have 20 or 30 foot tall statues like the one out here. And the men who led it, these 2 boys with their faces wrapped with backpacks, climbed up the statue together, and they were standing each on one shoulder of the man in Talahab Square. And they got the crowd going in unison, cheering something, something, America, something, something, America. And it definitely wasn't good. Not for me, not for an American. I knew that much. I didn't know what they said, but I knew it wasn't good. And with that said, they reached over to each other to unzip each other's backpacks, and they pulled a flag out and a flare out, and they each had an American flag. And I'm standing 20 feet from the base of the statue in a crowd of maybe 10,000 at this point. And these men light their flares, and they set my country's flag on fire. And pieces of it are just falling, ashes, flaming ashes of my country's flag, falling on my face, on my shoulders, as all of these men disparage my country and our foreign policy. And at this time, my Australian friend looks at me and just says, "I'm really sorry about this," in English. And plenty of these people speak English, but nobody really understood what he said that was close to us. But just hearing the English words being spoken was enough to get their attention, and enough to turn a few of them to question us. And at this point, he realized he made a mistake in talking at all in English. and he saw the looks that we got from the people, and we've seen people, local Egyptians, just assaulted on the spot and pounced on by 10 or 15 guys immediately for saying one thing against whatever the rest of the mob was supporting. And so I say, let's get out of here. Let's go at least to the outskirts, because he was there to get some photos. He had taken some photos and gotten them published from the first year, the actual Arab Spring. He was trapped in his hotel room in Tahrir Square. So he was coming back to see what it was like. But we walk away from the statue, from the burning flags. We go to the edge of the crowd. We're lucky that nobody's pounced us for speaking English, for being foreigners, Westerners. And we're discussing where we want to go next and what we're going to do. Maybe a few feet apart as he's smoking a cigarette, and all of a sudden a gas canister, a tear gas canister, comes right between our heads, and it goes underneath the car as it skids across the street. And we're lucky that it stayed underneath the car because it suppressed the gas. But once that canister hit and popped off, 10,000 Egyptians take off every direction. Just total madness. They know it's time to get out of there before they get arrested and they get beaten and they get questioned. And sooner or later, the police start closing off the blocks